Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kerok Almasian. Today, I brought to you a very interesting topic, and that is the announcement of Reza Pahlavi, the former crown prince of Iran during the era of Shah, which preceded the Islamic Revolution in Iran, that he will pay an official visit to Israel. And he will meet with senior Israeli politicians and officials in order to discuss with them political and agricultural issues. So I'm going to give you some historical and political contexts so that you judge later whether this visit is important or it is ridiculous. And for that, I digged into some history. I made my notes for you guys so that we learn together what happened before the Iranian Revolution when Shah was the king of Iran and Reza Pahlavi was the crown prince of Iran back then. And rest assured, every single information that I'm going to present to you today is documentable. And everything that I say today are historical facts, and nobody can dispute them because we know the documents of the CIA and the MI6 that after a few decades they release these documents or the secrecy of these documents expires. So we know what happened during that era. So if we start from World War II, we have to know that Britain occupied Iran during World War II in order to guarantee safe route from Iran to its then ally, which was the Soviet Union, and also to prevent the Iranian oil from falling into the hands of Nazi Germany. Noble cause at that time, right? However, Britain, after World War II, they kept the Iranian oil through the Anglo Iranian Oil Company. But in 1951, Iran's parliament voted to nationalize the oil industry in Iran. That's something that Western governments, especially in the 50s and the 60s, couldn't tolerate up until this moment, of course. But back then, it was a big thing. You remember when the former president of Egypt, Jamal Abdel Nasser, nationalized the Suez Canal. They bombed Egypt. There was a tripartite aggression by Israel, Great Britain, and France. And similar thing happened in the early 50s in Iran, and they nationalized their oil industry and also elected personality, his name is Mohammad Mossadegh, as a prime minister, who approved on this nationalization process for the natural resources of Iran. And therefore, the Brits were kicked out from this very, I would say, profitable business in Iran, which also has its geopolitical dimensions. So Britain responded with threats and sanctions against Iran, and British intelligence officials shared with the CIA their secret plan to oust Mossadegh, the new prime minister who wanted to nationalize the oil of Iran. In 1953, an Iranian general approached the US Embassy in Tehran and he met with CIA officials and discussed with them about the US support for any potential army led coup against Mossadegh. Now, the director of the CIA back then, he approved a $1 million budget to be used, I quote, in any way that would bring about the fall of Mossadegh. So it wasn't only the MI6 who participated in this, but there was a coordination between the MI6 and the CIA, a plot against Mohammad Mossadegh in order to oust him from power. So the CIA coordinated with a high ranking officer. His name was General Fazlollah Zahidi. General Fazlollah Zahidi, to carry out the coup or to lead the coup and called for the Shah back then, or Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, the father of Reza Pahlavi, who will pay a visit now to Israel, his father, to play a leading role. So there was the military aspect of the coup, which will be led by Fazlullah Zahidi, and the political aspect of the coup, which the CIA and the MI6 tasked the Shah, or Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, the father of Reza Pahlavi, who will visit Israel in the coming days. Now, in May 1953, representatives of the CIA and the MI6 met in Cyprus to plan for the coup. And this followed by, quote, gray propaganda. This was named by the CIA itself, called gray propaganda. And this propaganda was basically carried out by the CIA's office or station in Tehran itself. And they distributed at the beginning, for example, anti-Mossadegh cartoons, and they posted it in the streets, in public places, and later distributed it in by hand to the people. And after that, they started planting anti-Mossadegh articles in the Iranian press, and they even paid a big amount of money to the editor in chiefs or the representatives and owners of this Iranian press in order to write anti Mossadegh articles and post anti Mossadegh articles in their newspapers. In June 1953, the United States and British intelligence officials met again, but this time in Beirut, to finalize the coup plans. Just soon after this meeting, the chief of the CIA's Near East and Africa division, his name is Kermit Roosevelt, I think he is again the grandson of President Roosevelt, he arrived in Tehran to direct the coup. So there was the planning phase, and then when they wanted to implement the coup in Tehran, they sent Kermit Roosevelt to Tehran in order to coordinate and direct this coup with the senior general, Iranian senior general, and also Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. On July 11, 1953, President Eisenhower he signed off the plan of the coup finally because he was waiting for the final touches to be over by the CIA and the MI6, and he approved it. And after much confusion and hesitancy by the Shah, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi was a little bit a coward. And this was also documented in the documents of the CIA and the MI6. He was a coward, and he hesitated at some times to carry out the coup. He was afraid, but he was pushed hard by the CIA to coordinate with the general. So he finally met with this senior general Zahidi, and they coordinated together, and they successfully ousted Mossadegh from power, who was democratically elected by the Iranian people. So, what were the results of this coup? The first result was the Muhammad Reza Pahlavi and this general, they abolished the democratic rule and they established a monarchy, and he appointed himself the Shah of this monarchy, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi. Then the second result was the establishment of a pro-Western, anti-communist dictatorship. It was also during the Cold War times, so it was very important to have an anti-communist state in the region that blocks Russia's access in the Middle East and also in Central Asia and in Southern Caucasus. And finally, also the Brits again controlled the oil in Iran. So these were the results of the coup. There was no democracy and no democratic rule and no freedom of expression. It was a really brutal rule. And if you ask any Iranian, they would who lived that era, if they are honest with you, they will tell you it wasn't a democratic system. It was a monarchy, anyways. And because of this, because the Brits also controlled the oil and the people were deprived from their natural resources, there was an anti-Shah sentiments started to be spread in the community in Iran. And also it was during an era where political Islam also started to play some role in the region. And the Khomeini, he of course exploited this situation, and he started to mobilize the people with, I would say, first, Iranian nationalistic sentiments, and secondly, Islamic sentiments, anti imperialist sentiments against the Muhammad Reza Pahlavi and his pro American, pro Brits policies. And basically, he used the, the Shah's let's say, corruption with the Brits and the Americans in his favor. And he led a revolution in 1979, and he established an Islamic republic. So, anyone nowadays who doesn't address this historical background and political context of how Khomeini reached to power and why there was an Islamic revolution and why there is now strong anti-American sentiments in among the Iranians, if you don't tell the people these facts, you will think that just few evil theocrats arrived, reached to power, or they came to power with force, and they imposed their way of life or values on the people. Of course, there were people who didn't want an Islamic state, and I'm one of the people who, as I mentioned many times to you, that I 100% disagree with any theocracies. I would like to see civil, let's say, states. I disagree with the Iranian ruling system, but who am I to tell the Iranians what type of political system fits them, right? So this is the difference between me and an imperialist person who would stick his nose into the domestic affairs of any country. Iranians deal with their Iranian affairs. If they like this system, they can keep it. If they don't like it, they can change it. It's not my business. But what I'm trying to tell you is why this Islamic revolution happened. There was a history behind it. And if you don't explain this history, people will not understand the current situation there. So Reza Pahlavi, he, as I mentioned, he's the eldest son of Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, and before the 1979 revolution, he was the crown prince of Iran, and he was exiled after the revolution and lived in the United States since then. Now we have his statement. He posted it on Twitter. He says, I'm traveling to Israel to deliver a message of friendship from the Iranian people. Engage Israeli water experts on ways to address the regime's abuse of Iran's natural resources and pay respect to the victims of the Holocaust on Yom HaShoah. I want the people of Israel to know that the Islamic Republic doesn't represent the Iranian people. The ancient bond between our people can be rekindled for the benefit of both nations. I'm going to Israel to play my role in building toward that brighter future. Now, if you read the statement here, it says Reza Pahlavi, the exiled crown prince and advocate for secular democracy in Iran, will travel to Israel to carry a message of peace and friendship from the Iranian people in the spirit of Cyrus the Great, and to explore mutually beneficial economic, cultural, and environmental opportunities, starting with the possibility of utilizing Israel's water technology expertise to reverse Iran's water crisis caused by decades of the Islamic Republic's corruption and mismanagement. He plans to be in Israel on Yom Yashua and to pay respects to the victims of the Holocaust at the official Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremony at Yad Vashem. During his trip, Pahlavi will meet with senior government officials, water and agricultural experts, and members of the Iranian diaspora. Minister Gila Gamliel will represent the government in hosting the Crown Prince, who will also visit the Western Wall in Jerusalem and the Baha'i holy places and gardens in Haifa in solidarity with the Baha'i community. Finally, Pahlavi will deliver remarks outlining his vision for an Iranian democracy that celebrates freedoms of speech and religion, safeguarding human rights, protects its natural resources, and invests its treasure in the Iranian people rather than foreign terrorist groups such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The Crown Prince's visit to Israel comes at a time when the regime in Tehran continues to race toward a nuclear arsenal, threaten Israel with genocide, provide Russia with killer drones, kidnap and assassinate dissidents, and brutally suppress the Iranian people's nationwide protests after the murder of Mahsa Amini at the hands of the regime's morality police. Pahlavi has been the leading voice of the increasingly unified Iranian opposition, supporting the people's aspirations and offering a vision of a democratic Iran at peace with its neighbors. So it's an interesting, I would say, statement. I would like to make few notes. So Reza Pahlavi and his father, when they were in power, they were never been a Democrats, and they have never established a democracy. And now promoting themselves as secular Democrats is a little bit, in my opinion, ridiculous, because they had their chance. They've been in power for decades, and they didn't establish democracy. So the people may ask the question, what has changed now that you want to establish a democracy in Iran? Other people may also say that Iran is already a democracy. And I'm not saying it's a liberal democracy, but the elections in Iran, especially the parliamentary elections, are very, very, in my opinion, transparent. And there is a big participation in parliamentary elections in Iran. I would say it's more democratic than in Syria, way more, and way more transparent than in Syria. I think the Iranian system, if you put aside the religious aspect of it, I think the parliamentary system and the way they elect president and everything, it's astonishing in the Middle East. Secondly, I believe we have to address the timing of this visit to Israel. It comes a few months after the women's rights protests in Iran, which, in my opinion, I always mention this, and I don't want to repeat myself, but let's be clear on this. I am against forcing women to wear any sorts of dress imposed by the state. There can't be a dress code, unified dress code for everyone in Iran. There are different religions and faiths, and people, in my opinion, should be free to dress up the way they want. This is just my opinion. But the issue of the woman that died, and they say the morality police killed her. I think that's also very fishy, and it's not proven that the police killed her. And I've seen a few videos that she was in the morality police center and she was walking freely and nobody was arresting her, and she was sitting on a chair, and then she stood up and she walked, and while she was walking, she felt dizzy and she fell and she had a brain stroke or something, and she died there. So I truly, when I watched this video, I was like, no, this woman didn't die like under torture or some police brutality. No, she had a brain stroke. Maybe she was shocked, or she was I don't know, something happened to her because she was arrested, angry, or I don't know if that causes a brain stroke. But she didn't die with the police didn't kill her directly. So that's the second thing mentioned in this statement that I think it's not true. But most importantly, this comes after the Saudi Iranian rapprochement, which was mediated by China. And it seems that Israel isn't happy with this rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and trying to cause some internal troubles in Iran by the pro Shah people. Of course, there are people in Iran would be pro Shah now or pro Reza Pahlavi, and they could possibly trigger another protests or more brutal protests in the country, or Israeli backed insurgency in the north, for example. And we can see this happening especially by the support of Azerbaijan, which Israel uses this country as an advanced satellite state against Iran to spy and also to cause internal troubles inside Iran. However, I believe the visit of Reza Pahlavi to Israel is counterproductive for Israel and counterproductive for Reza Pahlavi himself, because one of the main pillars for the legitimacy of the Iranian leadership system, regime, call it whatever you want. The Iranian government sells its legitimacy to its people for being anti-Israel, anti-American, anti-imperialist. So when you have one of the main opposition figures going to Israel, other Iranian opposition figures talking to Israeli TV channels and coordinating with them and talking to them and telling them that we have no problem with Israel and everything, and completely disregarding the Palestinian rights or the Palestinian point of view in this conflict, I think this gives legitimacy to the Iranian government, and it becomes very easy to discredit the opposition. And the same thing happened with the Syrian opposition. The Syrian opposition, they are opposition figures, went to Israel. They were opposition figures talking to Israeli media channels. There were opposition figures asking Israel for help. Israel paid the salaries of Islamist militants in southern Syria at some point, and also received these Islamist militants in the Golan Heights and gave them medical treatment and sent them back to fight against the Syrian army. So it's like Israel is doing this behavior is just counterproductive for them, as if it's helping its enemies. Now, Syria and Iran will use this incident and say, look, Israel is with Pahlavi and Israel with the Syrian opposition. And what we say about this, that it's a conspiracy against us, is true. It makes things easier for them. This is just my opinion. And finally, as I mentioned, Shah isn't democratic, wasn't democratic, and he will not be, in my opinion, the democratic leader for the Iranians. And that's why it's very difficult for a person like him to come to power again. But that's just my analysis and just my predictions in this case. So, what do you think about this case? Do you think the visit of Reza Pahlavi to Israel is important? He is called or portrayed as the highest ranking Iranian official in Israel. Do you think it's important? Do you think it's ridiculous? What's your opinion on this? And do you agree with my analysis? Let me know in the comments below, guys. I've been your host, Kirk Almasian of Syriana Analysis. If you're new, please subscribe, hit the like button, share it with your friends. And if you want to support my independent journalistic and commentary work, please become a patron. Link in the description below. And see you next time.